What comes first, the logic or the program? No. Don't ask this question. You're going to get into philosophy, and you don't need to. After all, you only need to study programming language commands and logical operators to program. Yup, of course not. What is logic? Logic, from the Greek lambda omicron gamma iota kappa logos, 1, has two main meanings. It discusses the use of reasoning in some activity, and it is the normative, philosophical study of valid reasoning. 2, in the second sense, logic is discussed mainly in the disciplines of philosophy, mathematics, and computer science. Both senses are based on the common focus regarding the harmony of reasoning, the formal proportionality between arguments. Therefore, the correct and balanced relationship between all terms. The total agreement between each of them within development. Source wikipedia.org. Logic. Programming logic is the personality of a program. Logic is a reasoning technique with purpose and procedure. Source, book Technology, The Dream Career, Behavior and Procedure, Oder Garcia Aruca. Then, if logic is so important, then why in many higher education courses do we still have restricted classes on this subject? This is a question that I already asked when I was taking programming classes at university. After all, to put together a program, it is not enough to just allocate commands. As well as, depending on the complexity of the program, continuous processing, game engine, auditor, risk assessment, provision of any nature, information projection, critical information analysis, digital security, among others. In addition to developing a logic, it needs to have a behavioral design, which is actually the soul of this program. Can logic be drawn? Regarding this, here we would have two good paradigms linked to the act of developing a program or application. The first hovers in the outside view of the programmer, who considers that the programmer only needs to associate some commands in a fixed sequence, and in the end the program is ready. Basically like a pastry shop in the view of a client who doesn't pay attention to everything necessary, so that pastry comes out ready and warm. After all, it's quick. The second is in the perception of professionals in the programming area, generally beginners who believe that they only need to study purely technical factors without adding to their knowledge, for example philosophy, literature, management, history, and other complementary studies from highly involved areas with technology. Now, can a program exist without logic, even though the program is developed only to display a message or to feed the content of any variable? It starts from a need and a harmony of commands, so that its main purpose is executed. So, no matter how basic and simple a program is, it needs logic to exist. In general, when a developer is hearing about the need for development or reading the technical document, which contains information about the development that needs to be done, his mind starts to create the connections, the paths for this program to be developed. Made a symphony, finding the sound of all the instruments and making their sounds into harmonious music. This first contact and pure inspiration, we could call it the Fresca effect. But this effect is not the program itself, it is just a path to get to its assembly. Some developers need to draw, literally, right after reading a technical document or receiving an explanation about the need for the application in order to develop the routine. Others scribble some things on paper. Yes, I will say it this way, because only they will understand what that scribble is. Don't try to understand, comma. But it is the way they are creating a path for that spark. And of course, there is the group that goes about developing what they already have in mind, in an uninterrupted and deliberate way, already looking for a form, and thus putting together their work of art, that is, the program. This creation of the program's logic can be extremely simple in some situations, but it also happens to leave the developer walking through the company corridors for hours, or in circles talking to himself, or with his anti-stress ball. Why do they still insist on give this to a developer? Throwing it on the floor, wall, or simply needing it incessantly? Yes, it seems crazy, but it's part of the spark effect, finding the construction of what will happen with the program. Basically, the entire life of this program passes through the developer's head before its creation, as well as the risks, possible errors, user interventions, and other related and dependent routines. It's literally the Big Bang being born regarding this process. It is little explored, measured, and technically understood, after all. For each developer, it has a form, action, consequence, and time to complete. Seeing a developer standing still, looking at the ceiling, you can be sure that he is not looking to paint the ceiling or admiring the architecture of the environment. In fact, he is not even there at that moment, and frankly, he is not there for nothing. He is working. For more complex processing logic, studying the logic and designing it is even recommended. As developers who do not work privately, preferably remotely, and are not placed in rooms with extreme air conditioning and sharing it with over 500 other developers, or in environments with a lot of noise and access from anyone at any time to them, being basically treated like laboratory rats and not as creative professionals, makes the creative process much slower, weaker, and of low quality. Just meeting the basics and not what really needs to be addressed. So a drawing keeps the focus and attention on what needs to be created. And as for who was born first, it remains a good question.